I start preaching, there's a word that I think will be familiar to a lot of folks, but might not be familiar to a lot of folks. It's a horticultural word, a plant-based word. And I want to invite us to do something weird and that involves a little bit of movement, just so we all have this image in our mind for when I get to it. And I wonder if Angie and Azalea, could I get you two here first? The word is rhizome. So some of you know what that is. It's a kind of plant. And I wonder if we can make a rhizome here. If we could come right here to the middle. Can we come right here to the middle? And can we hold hands? And then I wonder if May and Annie, if you could come out and grab hands with someone, and then other folks, if you could come to the middle and just grab a hand somewhere. We're going to make a network of grabbed hands. Oh, there we go. Cool. And if somebody's hand already has a hand on it, you can still grab one, because we don't have to be just in a circle. I'm gonna reach over here. I'll do this. Can I reach over here? So this is a rhizome. Is a kind of plant that spreads out underground. The stems grow horizontally underground, and they make little new root knots. They shoot down roots everywhere. So it's kind of like a net or a network that's growing along the ground that lets these plants grow. And if you pick one, there's roots all over the place. So they're all actually, it keeps them pretty robust, which, you know, when it's like the onion grass in my lawn at home, it's not so exciting, but it's a pretty cool metaphor of care. So thanks. That's what I want. That's what I wanted to do. Start with a little bit of movement, just so when I get to that word in the sermon. Oh, sorry, I meant to include the people on Zoom by saying this one's weird. You can reach out your arms to either side and connect with the people to the side, or you can reach to the top or to the bottom, wherever you see people around you. You can reach out and look, there's my hand is on the ceiling, and it's reaching down to my dad, who is below us on screen. So how about that? So we were a rhizome. That's just so we understand the word when I get to it this morning. And I'm going to do things out of order this morning, out of our usual order, and give the benediction. No, I'm not giving the benediction. Everybody's going to leave if I do that. But I'm going to start with our Bible reading this morning instead of our first reading, because, you know, I like to be radical that way sometimes. But I want to start with this reading, which comes at very nearly the end of the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, which are the books that set the foundations for the story that Israel will tell about itself in the rest of its scriptures. And these 5 books, they start out with the creation of the world, and then the destruction of the world, and the recreation of the world. And then they tell the story of a developing monotheism as Abraham and Sarah feel themselves called and tugged to leave their homelands and head to someplace else that would be revealed to them along the way. And when they get there, it's a story that features these cycles of hope and doubt and trust and fulfillment. It's a story that involves a detour into Egypt, where the people are enslaved for a period and then freed by the power of God. It's a story, we might say, of the faithless faithful, wandering in the wilderness for 40 years before finally getting to the place that they'd call home. That's the first 5 books of the Bible in a nutshell, right? The Cliff Notes version. So this reading, which is one of the assigned readings for the day, comes very near the end of that period. And it's from a long speech by Moses, who has helped to lead the people through the wilderness for all of these years, and who knows that he's going to die before they actually get into the homeland. So he's this promised land. So he's giving them a story, a reminder, directions, kind of reminding them of what they've been through, and then laying out the terms of their covenant with God, or their treaty, or the promises, their agreement with God. And so this is what he says to them. This is the Bible reading for the day, from Deuteronomy chapter 30. Look, I have set before you today life and prosperity, or death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of your God that I'm commanding you today, by loving God, walking in their ways, and observing their commandments, decrees, and laws, then you shall live and become numerous, and God will bless you in the land that you're entering. But if your heart turns away and you don't hear, and you're led astray and bow down to other gods and serve them, I am declaring to you today that you're going to perish. You won't live long in the land that you're crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth as witnesses today that I have set before you life or death, blessings or curses. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live, loving God, obeying them, holding fast to them, for that means life to you, and length of days, so that you may live in that land that God swore to give to your ancestors, to Sarah and Abraham, to Rebekah and Isaac, to Leah and Rachel and Jacob. Life and prosperity, or death and adversity. This puts me in mind of a scene from Kenneth Branagh's 2021 movie Belfast. Did anyone see that? Oh, I really recommend it. It's got some hard stuff in it, which you would expect because it's a movie set in Northern Ireland in the 1960s, as political and sectarian violence is brewing. But it's also lovely and delightful in some really surprising ways. It follows a 9-year-old named Buddy and his family as they just live life against a backdrop of hard times. So this scene that I'm actually going to have Faith play for us, it comes at a moment where 9-year-old Buddy is trying to convince his parents to let him and his brother skip church. Why should they have to go when their parents don't go, is his argument. But their dad says, well, your granny would kill me if I didn't make you go. So off they go to church without their parents. And we're going to see the message that they get in their Protestant church. The voiceover at the very beginning of this scene is Buddy's dad saying, I have nothing against Catholics, but it's a religion of fear. And then we'll see the Protestant minister warming up to his task. You would need to look that up later again. It's under menacing ministers scene. Clearly channeling, it seems like an inner Moses. So I want to talk to you today about those two choices. It's amazing how a message that is supposedly about life can become so deadly, right? I mostly wanted to show that because I just saw the movie last weekend, and it's still on my mind, and I loved it and wanted to recommend it, and maybe also just because I wanted to remind you how lucky you are that he's not your minister. I promise not to ever preach like that. I can't make any promises on behalf of Priscilla. But I wonder if we can hear past, because I've read this passage that says life and death and feels very dramatic, and is very dramatic. I wonder if we can hear past the caricature that too much of Christianity has made of itself and take seriously the Bible's notion that there really is a path that leads to life and a path that leads to death. And again, if hearing someone say that from a pulpit or a lectern, or what's the name for this, Tony, a rolly stand? If hearing someone in a minister's drag makes you feel a little bit anxious, then I get that. There's a lot of harmful religion floating around in the world and in this country, and people like me have used words like that to hurt a lot of people. So I aim not to do that. But maybe we can take a moment to notice the terms of this covenant, this road, this choice between life and death, this agreement between God and people. The terms of this agreement, they include bodies, but they don't actually spend a whole lot of time scolding people for having them. Imagine that. They also include the earth. They're not empty or abstract promises. They're involved in soil and roots and dirt. They're not uprooted. There is a path to life, and that path is about relatedness. Choose life, and you will be in productive partnership with the land. You hear that in the terms of it. There will be blessing in your community, and you will be a blessing to future generations. Your spirit will be enlarged by God. There is a path of death, and that's the path that breaks all of those connections, breaks our connections with the earth, with one another, with the past and the future generations. Now, here is our first reading, just out of order. Is it still our first reading? I don't know. It can be. In Ross Gay's new book, Inciting Joy, he includes an essay about the community orchard in Bloomington, Indiana, that he was a part of organizing. The essay is about all the relationship building and the work that it took to turn this dream into a reality of a community orchard where people will eventually be able to come and just have fresh fruit for free. He writes that the process of helping to organize and labor for something, at least potentially, that he won't directly benefit from, challenged his notion of time and our place in it. Orchards take time for the plants to grow, the trees to grow, to start putting out abundant fruit. And he is a university teacher who could always be downsized or lose his job, have to move, face some catastrophe. There's no guarantee that all the work he put into it is something that he will get out of it, is the point. So he says that it made him rethink something that he had earlier written and talked about, in which he suggested, here's the actual reading part, in which he suggested that maybe it's not such a good idea for us to want to take up space into the future, to impose our art, our lives, our anything through time. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should just do our work for the here and now. This was his old position, and there's something useful in it. But then he says, well, I'm afraid we don't really have a choice in the matter, it turns out. Bummer. What we do in the here and now exists already beneath your boot soles in the future. Look for me there. Look for me when you turn on your air conditioner. Look for me when the hurricane is coming. Look for me as this virus that used to live in the depths of the forest enters your body. Look for me when you're having an asthma attack. Look for me when the parched tree snaps into flame. Look for me as you run, taking only your skin with you. Look for me as you build your boat. Look for me in the wreckage, noticing how our actions impact the future. He says, or look for me in the orchard. Though I didn't yet have the words for it, planting the orchard, by which I mean, you know this by now, joining my labor to the labor by which it came to be, reminded me or illuminated for me a matrix of connection, of care that exists not only in the here and now, but comes to us from the past and extends forward into the future. Here's the word, rhizomatic care I so often forget to notice I am every second in the midst of, by which I came to be and am at all, despite every single lie to the contrary, despite every single action born of that lie. We are in the midst of rhizomatic care that extends in every direction, spatially, temporally, spiritually, you name it. It's certainly not the only thing we're in the midst of, but it's the truest thing by far. Did you hear it? Today, he set before us life and death, blessing and curse, prosperity and adversity. He called heaven and earth as witnesses. We're implicated, and we've got to choose, not once and done, but over and over and over. The past and its choices have shaped where we are now. What we do now will shape what will be. The choices accrue over and over. So how do we enlarge our recognition of that web of life, that rhizomatic care, he says, so that everyone will be able to thrive? One way is letting go of the things that own us. A couple of weeks ago, the Inquirer reprinted a story about Lisa Snowden McCrae. She's a black journalist in Baltimore. A few years back, she and another journalist, a partner named Brandon Soderberg, dreamed of launching a free weekly paper called the Baltimore Beat. And she spelled out, Joy, you read the story as well, I can tell. I always know other newspaper readers because they nod at me when I'm recounting the Inquirer stories. Lisa Snowden McCrae, she spelled out the goals of her the Baltimore Beat, this paper, this way. She said, "We wanted to give black writers the opportunity to tell their stories. We wanted to help add depth to the stories that are told about Baltimore. We wanted to make a paper that reflected the joys, the art created here, the celebrations held here, the lives lived here, and sadness of Baltimore. Noble and life-giving goals." But their publisher pulled the plug before they really even got off the ground. So in early 2020, I think maybe just before the pandemic hit, because it sounds like this happened at a party, by mid-March 2020, nobody on the East Coast was having parties anymore. But a friend asked if she had any plans to try to restart this newspaper. And the friend, Adam Hollifsener, was a white activist and lawyer who she knew through progressive circles. What she and her partner, Brandon Soderberg, did not know is that there was some money in his family that he had been trying to think very deeply about. His grandfather had been a Baltimorean who amassed a good bit of wealth through insurance businesses and then through a set of golf and skiing supply chain stores, and then joined the white flight out of Baltimore. So took the wealth that he'd amassed in the city out into the suburbs and helped hollow out the tax base that still has ramifications today. So Hollifsener figures that his family's wealth came at the expense of the city's black residents. Some of that wealth later went into creating a family foundation to make philanthropic gifts. They'd made what he calls a hodgepodge of unfocused grants over the course of decades. There was a little over $1 million left in this family foundation. He wanted to think in a bigger way about where that wealth had come from and what it could do. So he reached out to his sister and to their cousin, and together, stakeholders in this family foundation, and together they read a book called Decolonizing Wealth, which advocates for philanthropists to let go, to respond to the actual needs of grantees instead of dictating how money is used or how they operate. The three of them were in agreement. The wealth that their family held had been extracted from the city of Baltimore, so it needed to be returned to Baltimore in a focused way. And they made a pitch to their uncle, who was the only board member on the foundation at the time. And he bought in. And so they put their family foundation out of business. They directed the entirety of their $1 million to the Baltimore beat, which involved working for several months with Lisa Snowden McCrae and Brandon Soderberg to make sure that the paper would have a smooth rollout. But the money was a pledge that came without preconditions. It was a letting go. And that money helped the paper raise additional funds because funders saw that they were on solid financial footing. So the paper's vision was refined in the process. They strategized about the best places to make it available so the people who would most benefit would have access to it. And they scaled it back so it came out every other week to keep the production costs reasonable. But Baltimore now has a free, Black-run paper supporting Black writers, amplifying Black voices, and it got off the ground with the assistance of wealth that a white family had extracted from the city generations ago, and that the family's heirs have now helped redirect back into the city. The younger generation of the family figured it was critical for them to put their foundation out of business because that could be an example that would spur some other philanthropic foundations to act boldly instead of timidly. Adam Hollifcenter said it was important that not only were we giving all the money away, but that we were losing the money. It's as important to disempower ourselves as it is to empower them. And I don't have a family foundation with $1 million to give away, but I recognize in that the power of seeing where your life has come from, and letting go of the things that need to be let go of, and redirecting to the places that need more. The return of wealth, letting go, the loosening of the closed fist, rhizomatic care, the networks of relationships that enlarge rather than diminish. We're in the midst of care that expands in every direction if only we will notice it and tend it. Life and death, blessing and curse, prosperity and adversity. There's an invitation for us to choose life. So let's take it. This is God's good news. Amen.